Hi, and welcome. I'm Reverend Dr. Glenn Picker, the Relationship Doctor. Thank you for joining me on this third and final video in the Relationship Rescue Kit series. I'm thinking that by now you watched the first two videos, taken the tag test, and checked out the website at least a little bit. And the fact that you've so diligently pursued that knowledge shows me that you are clearly serious about transforming your relationships. Please know that I think what you're doing is truly admirable and godly. Today I want to take you even one step further on this journey by introducing you to what I call the 50-50 rule. This seemingly simple rule is the biggest reason, just so you know, why clients actually get upset with me. And here's how it comes. Most couples play tag, as you now know, and in that game, right, the only question is whose fault is it? And I want the answer to be not me, right? But in truly healthy Christian relationships, we need to replace that very worldly shaming question, whose fault is it, with three way better questions, godly questions. Here are the three godly questions. What are the patterns that we get into, we? What is my half of that pattern, the log in my eye? And what do I need to do to change my half of that pattern? In other words, instead of focusing on the speck in your eye, I need to see what happens when we have one of those conversations. I need to prayerfully discern what my log might be, what my half of that conversation is, and I need to begin to take corrective action. Now, you can see why this would be upsetting news to the client who arrives at my office convinced that the other person is it, that everything is their fault. And if they would just get it together, I'd be fine. They don't see the 50-50 rule as being good news. But see, it actually is. Because if I'm half of the problem in any relationship, then I can start attacking that problem right now. Otherwise, what am I? I'm just a victim who has to powerlessly wait for the other person to get it together. This is a totally disempowering thought, and it's an ungodly one. Jesus says, seek and ye shall find. We're to ask God for what we want, watch for the possibilities that He will create in our lives, and then act in a way where we can turn those possibilities into realities. Our faith is not about being a powerless victim. It's about asking, watching, listening, and then acting in a way that brings about the abundant life that Jesus calls us into. So we had to claim our half of the problem instead of acting like we're just the innocent bystander, just reacting to their awful behavior, right? Truly, it's just not helpful to assume that we're not part of the problem. But just to be clear, be careful, don't go the other way either. It's also not helpful to assume that we're the whole problem, because that's not true either. We are half of what happens, exactly 50% of whatever happens when we're having one of those interactions, right? Now, this topic is so important. I mean, it's just critically important to any Christian. In fact, it's where my new 5-part online course starts because it's so fundamental. In that course, we're going to pick up from right where this day ends off because there is so much more that I can teach you about this topic, and partly because the 50-50 rule really is the foundation of all godly transformation. Now, please understand, I don't say that as a commercial. I just want you to know that there is a way for you to continue this education as soon as you finish with the Relationship Rescue Kit, if you should so choose to do that. Okay, now, this next part is a commercial, although I promise you a very short one. Most courses like my online course sell for anywhere from $169 to $259. But I'm selling this course along with a copy of my Tag ebook, which will open your eyes, for just $99 total. Why? Because I care about you. And I really want to make sure that you have access to this course and that you can continue the path that you have so bravely chosen, the path of godly transformation. That course in the book will take you far deeper into the 50-50 rule and into Tag, but there is a lot more to it. You will also learn how to move past your personal fears in order to create the amazing relationships and the big life that God's calling you into. You will also learn how to override your limiting beliefs. And finally, you will learn how you can most powerfully talk to others in your life about everything you're learning so that you can make a difference in their life. In short, you will start the process of going from being a student to being a teacher, a person who knows more than about relationships than 90% of the people in this country, including most so-called relationship experts. And you'll be the kind of teacher who makes a difference in the world, a godly difference. Happiness and a true sense of purpose. That's a great combination. And that's what I want for you. If that's what you want too, I urge you to buy this life-changing course. I'm thinking you're going to love it. But honestly, even if you don't, just send it back for a refund, no questions asked. We'll refund it instantly because love is always the right answer, right? All right. Told you it'd be a short commercial. Back to our regularly scheduled program. Before I finish today, I want to teach each of you one very helpful skill and provide you with one really important warning when it comes to using the 50-50 rule. We're going to start with the skill. If you want to understand what your half of the problem is, you need to start by assuming that your usual response is not helpful or necessary. Because our knee-jerk response is to defend, explain, or rationalize our behavior. In other words, we try to justify ourselves. But as Christians, what we know is that we've already been justified. That's done. We've already been named precious, beloved, very good. So the next time you think you need, quote unquote, to defend yourself, I would ask you to stop. Remind yourself that you do not have to earn or prove your justification, since you are loved with a steadfast love already. And then ask yourself two questions instead. One, how would my usual part of the next step in the conversation be unhelpful? How would it help this conversation keep going badly? In other words, what do I usually do that keeps a bad conversation going bad? Right? Do I shut down? Do I bring up something they did wrong? Do I try and persuade them? Do I deflect? What do I usually do that keeps this conversation going poorly? One. And then two, and what can I do or say instead that would actually be helpful here? And I promise you, if you ask those two questions prayerfully, seeking God's guidance, you'll be flooded with right answers. So many right answers. Because God loves it when we ask the right questions. Here's what I mean. Early on in my marriage with Gwen, things were going poorly. I was at a retreat center just outside of Chicago, sitting by the lake, and just really praying to God, God, how can I talk to Gwen about this? What should I say? How can I explain how she's hurtful to me? Blah, blah, blah. Asked that question so many different ways, so many different angles, got no answer. Nothing. And it occurred to me that I need to see the log in my own eye. So I started asking different questions. God, what am I doing? How am I being unhelpful? What do I need to do to be more honoring to Gwen? How do I make the relationship safer? What does she need from me that she's not getting? And I got flooded with right answers to those questions. Because God loves it when we ask the right question. And trust me, the right question is never about them. It's always about us. Because God understands all transformation starts inside of us and then moves outward. So, the first skill I want to give you then, when you're seeking to understand that log in your own eye, is to ask God those two right questions that I suggested. This will help you to see the pattern that's going on, identify your half of the pattern, and then begin to take action that will change your half of that pattern. I meant that when I said earlier that the ability to see your half of that pattern and the willingness to change it instead of looking for excuses not to or people to blame it on is a beginning point of all godly transformation. It all starts right there. The new life that you want to create starts right there with the 50-50 rule. What do I usually do here that's not helpful? What can I do different? That's where new life starts. And this skill, that ability to ask those two questions, is not optional if you're serious about becoming the new creation that God has in mind. So take heart. Ask God for the guidance and the courage that you need in order to implement that skill, and then take that leap of faith to do that thing differently, even if you're not sure, even if you don't know how the other one's going to respond. Well, what did they do or say then? Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, God will say to you, well done, good and faithful servant, and that should be your goal. Now, and every time you do this, I promise you, you will consistently get better at it. And you'll get to the point where you'll spend the rest of your life being happier in all of your relationships and proud in the right way that you took that leap, that you started practicing that skill. And you will be able to hear, as I said, God saying that small, still voice every single time you do that. Well done, good and faithful servant. A client of mine said to me recently, Glenn, now that we use the 50-50 rule all the time, we get to resolution so much faster, which is great. I'm really proud of how we do things now. See, you will be proud of yourselves too when you consistently ask yourself those two questions. What would I normally do here that would keep this bad conversation going? What can I do or say differently that would actually be helpful instead? That skill will be so useful to you, like 10 times a day at least, which is all well and good. But remember, I also said that I had a warning for you, and this is it. Looking for your half of the pattern at a time when you're not surrounded by God's love is a setup for shame and depression. People who have near-death experiences who die, cross over, and then come back to us what it's like on the other side. So it is true that we go through that life review where we see everything we did and how it affected every person in our life. In other words, even on the other side, relationships are all that really matters. They're everything. Now, but they also say, while you're watching that life review, while you're seeing those pictures, you are surrounded by God's love, that gentle, beautiful, powerful, warm light that lets you know you're amazing, you're precious, I love you so much. So yeah, you see your mistakes, but not in a shaming way, not in an icky way, in a way where you're set up, surrounded by God's love. And we need to do the same things. We need to understand, yes, I've made serious mistakes in my life, and, not but, and I'm precious, loved with a steadfast love, and created in the very image of our God. So we need to be just like a toddler. Every little kid thinks they're the center of the world, right? Which they pretty much are. And when the little kid's just learning how to walk, they pull themselves up, they take one step, they fall down. They don't think, oh, I must be a bad kid, right? They think, oh, I'm an amazing kid, but I probably need to lean a little further forward next time. So in other words, they see the mistake, they acknowledge the mistake, and they just look for a way to do it different. Perfect. While assuming that they're still precious and beloved. And when Jesus said, unless we become like a child that can't enter the kingdom, this is what he meant. In the light of God, I can see my mistakes, my past and current mistakes for what they are. Mistakes. Just things I need to learn from that I could do differently going forward. That's it. The evil one wants you to see your mistakes as quote-unquote proof that you're not good enough, that you're bad, that you're it, that you need somehow to justify yourself because so far you're not good enough. See, that's crazy. God loves you through your mistakes. God loves you while you're making those mistakes. And God encourages you and gives you the courage to change by learning from your mistakes. And so do all the people in your life who care for you. So don't be afraid to claim your justification. It will help you be open to seeing your half of the problem, willing to acknowledge your half, and humble enough to ask God for the courage to do your half differently, while remembering that God has already named you. You are beloved. Your name is perfect. Your name is precious in his sight. You are that one, even when you fall down, even as you are falling down. And even as you come to God and ask, what can I learn from that falling down? How can I do that differently? You are still loved, beloved, precious, perfect in God's sight. You are that one, even when you fall down. I hope to continue our conversation with you through our online course because, yeah, you matter to me. That's how come. In the meantime, you take care.